All right. Hi, I'm Stephanie Mandeville. I am Communications Director for NEA Rhode Island, and I am here with the President of NEA, Larry Pirtle, and Executive Director Bob Walsh. Hello, gentlemen.
Hi, Steph.
This is our third episode, I guess we can call it, of Ask Larry and Bob. Loving that we're getting all these questions in from members. Some are repeats, but I think that some of this stuff is worth repeating. So we can kind of move right in on these, actually, if we want to. Let me just say the date first, because things change so quickly. Today is Monday, April 27th. And so we're going to start right off with Angela in Cumberland. Angela has a question about certifications. Her certification expires in August. Looking for guidance there. We did have a question on this in the first, I believe, and the second Ask Larry and Bob, but let's cover it again. Bob, you want to take this one? Or is this Larry? This is Larry.
Our certification expert.
Yeah, I wish. I thought by now we'd have the definite answer on certification. We're waiting on RIDE to release what their recommendation is going to be. We know we have the August 31st deadline. We've been pushing for a bit of an extension on that if people need it. However, if you are close to the 15 PLUs or close to being wrapped up, then we encourage you to do that. The professional development days that were built into the April calendar and the May calendar any professional development done during that time should count toward those 15 PLUs. So we think most people won't have a problem, but we are pushing to get a few months extension if anyone needs it, and hopefully RIDE will come out with that soon.
Okay, good. We have several questions that are focused primarily on social distancing and kind of questions about what is school going to look like when we go back. We have Leslie in Cumberland asking about how are kids going to social distance on buses and in school. Will schools need to supply faculty with masks and hand sanitizer? What is this going to look like? Can you guys give some guidance for our members here?
Well, it's definitely a work in progress, and we are in close communication with the folks in the governor's office on that very question. If you break the rest of this calendar year down into 3 phases, we now have a sense of what phase 1 is going to be. We're not going back to school this academic year. The schools in their traditional school year will close no later than June 18th. And I'm jumping ahead by addressing another question and saying that, or earlier if that's when you were scheduled to end. And let me divert from the question and talk about that for a second. If your school system was scheduled to end, say, June 11th, then work with your local leadership and your UNISERV director, talk to the superintendent about how to guide that ending day. If June 11th was your last day of school and it makes sense to, if everyone agrees, to end school a day or two earlier for the students, and then on using professional development and other opportunities, giving the teachers one last opportunity in a social distancing way to get back into their classrooms, clean them out, get their stuff, and think about what next year is going to look like, that might be a sensible solution for your district. And that's where it's going to look different in every one of our districts. So use June, no later than June 18th, but whatever your last day scheduled, and then talk about what those last couple of days should look like so that everyone can maybe get back into that building one last time in a safe and socially distant way. The second phase is going to be the summer. There are going to be lots of opportunities this summer for teachers, for education support professionals, for your kid home from college, for high school seniors to do things, to work with students. There's a lot of summer programs that aren't going to be running this summer, and we're going to look to replace those because it's not like all of this is going to go away all at once. We're still going to need to interact with our students in the summer on a voluntary basis, but they'll be, on a paid basis, but no one's going to be forced into service. And then there'll be the third phase, what schools look like when they open. And those, a lot of those we don't have the answers to now. We know what the choke points are. Even if we open schools on an every other classroom basis, or only half the kids in the classroom with some distance learning, there are all sorts of ideas and models out there, and you're starting to see articles crop up. But the question points to a lot of important things. We're going to need the resources in the schools. You might see a lot of empty hand sanitizer devices in your schools from the last time we needed them. We're going to have to refill those. We're going to need masks for everyone if that's indicated. But this is where Rhode Island is once again ahead of the curve. We're working with the governor's office. We're working with all the right folks. So we're going to do the smart thing. And if we're not ready, we're not going to open. So we really want to open if that's what the science says, but only if it's smart and safe. And things like school buses and exchanges and cafeterias and gymnasiums and all the folks people gather, we're going to have to be very thoughtful about doing things differently if necessary, but always the smart thing to do.
Part of that, there's another question we have down here from Joyce in North Kingstown, wondering if they're going to hold back older teachers from entering the school.
Well, let's refer to Larry on that since he falls in that category.
Yeah, I will say that when the governor said that about people over 60, the only time I've disagreed with her on the last 2 months. I just want to touch on one thing that Bob talked about too is, what it's going to look like in the fall before we even get to that question, because it's important. We can look at some countries that are already started to reopen. Denmark's a good example. They're limiting their class sizes to 10. They've gone with, a few grades one day, a couple grades another day. So there are so many options out there. And as Bob said, it's a work in progress. One of the problems we're going to face is we don't have the infrastructure that many of those countries have. For example, if it's every other day, what do we do about childcare? We don't have universal childcare. So there's a lot of issues going into the fall. And for the summer, it's how do we meet the social emotional needs of students and also catch them up academically for some of those who may need it before the fall starts. But for the over 60, or especially over 65 and 70, if they have, I'm more concerned about people who have underlying conditions. Districts are going to have to work to how do we keep those people employed, but also make sure that social distancing exists, the masks and everything we just talked about, and make sure that we provide the necessary arrangements for them to work as well. Maybe they do some of the social distancing. Maybe they come in after, if they're a custodian, maybe they come in after school hours when the building's empty to do that. So things are going to be a lot different, but yeah, we're going to have to meet the needs of people. I'm not so worried about people over 60 who are healthy and fit. I'm more worried about people, and a lot of people, the underlying conditions that we know where puts people at real risk.
Yeah, and we also have to be prepared. I don't want to scare anyone. We also have to be prepared if we start in a relatively normal fashion the school year, once the fall goes on, and if this resurges, which a lot of models suggest it might, and at the same time the flu is widespread, the regular flu, we may have to make some decisions that look like what we've been doing now, but we'll be better prepared for that. I think one of the things that's not a policy issue, but something that we have to be thoughtful about is it time for a common school calendar? Should schools open on the same time, set aside several days, a subset of which can be used for professional development, and schedule to close at the same time, recognizing that the concept of snow days may be something we never have anymore. It might be, all right, we're not running the buses today. We're going to run school remotely like we've done, for a day, like we've done so far. So there's a lot of things that we've taken for granted on the way it used to work that may change as part of a greater approach to being safer in the way things work. You could envision a scenario where the teachers are teaching from their classrooms and the kids are learning at home in one model. So we just don't know, but we can be prepared for all those contingencies. And again, this is why we're very, very proud that Rhode Island is far ahead of the curve in so many of these areas.
And I think we have to really push for the things we know that work going forward too. We've said, I mean, for decades, we know that smaller class sizes work in most cases. Well, this may drive us to smaller class sizes that would be helpful. Social emotional needs may take precedent over, a test score, which we've been saying for an awful long time too. So I think as bad as this is, in going forward, we have a lot of challenges. We ought to take a look at what the good that might come out of this and adopt that too going forward.
Good, thank you. We have a question from a Newport member who is asking, if you're a teacher and normally work an educational job full-time in the summer, that may be in jeopardy because of COVID-19, are you able to apply and collect unemployment? I'm the main provider for my household and rely on that income during the summer. We are still a district that does not pay over the summer or wants to even offer the option to its members. I thank you all for your efforts and looking for advice.
Well, you do, yeah, that's good news and bad news on that. You do get paid over the summer. You get paid for an entire school year, however they do the paychecks. Some stagger the paychecks related to the actual academic year. Some stagger them over 26 weeks, but it is the same pay. Obviously, you get health care over the summer, so you're a year-round employee. So the bad news in the unemployment system, that would not necessarily be something you could collect on. The good news, as I referenced earlier, if you are someone who usually picks up summer work doing educational things, it is our belief those opportunities will be there in great abundance and funded with some of the federal support that our congressional delegation, led by Jack Reed, has done a remarkable job in getting for our state. So I would say hang on that, and I think there will be opportunities for you to do additional work to support your family over the summer like you've always done.
Good. We have Joanne in East Greenwich asking on behalf of multiple members. Many paraprofessionals are holding one-to-one Google Meets with students to reinforce what they've learned from their teachers in their online classes, as well as providing additional academic support. The district is suggesting that paras not meet without a teacher present, which is not possible most times. Looking for advice there from you guys.
Well, if they're only suggesting it, Joanne, you might suggest that that makes no sense and it's impossible, and then see what they follow up from our suggestion to their suggestion. I don't mean to sound snarky on that, but a little snarky, I guess, because if they're saying that it's a policy, we're going to pay you to do nothing versus interact one-on-one with the teachers, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I would talk to them about it. I think there's a reasonable way, because then it's not a one-on-one, it's a two-on-one, and that wouldn't be good for anybody involved. So I'm puzzled by that pushback, but I would suspect that's something we can work out.
Yeah, and just look at the guidance coming down from the governor's office on all that. I mean, we want our ESP members working with students and following up with students. I mean, it seems like what you described they don't want you to do is exactly what you should be doing. So
it's exactly what happens in the classroom. You're working individually with the student while the teacher is focused on other things to follow up on a lesson that they might have done directly with the teacher. So it sounds like it fits into the current, the old model, we'll say, not the current model.
Kristen in East Greenwich is asking about personal days. If a teacher hasn't used their personal days, will there be an exception for them to be rolled over into next year?
I don't know. That's a good question. One, you have to go to the contract. This is where you definitely talk to your local president or presidents in your case in East Greenwich and Uniserve. I could see, I have a couple of ideas right off the top of my head. If everybody's got unused personal days, maybe you collectively go and say, guess what? We're all taking a personal day on what was going to be the last day of school. So you end one day earlier. You could negotiate everyone who didn't use one carries one over. And there's nothing to prohibit you from taking a personal day now and just say, hey, I'm checking out that day. I'm not going to be available to do distance learning. So those are three options right off the top of my head, and rolling them over if it's either currently involved in the contract or something you can work out district by district. They're all workable solutions, I think.
I would think just stay in contact with your local president in Uniserv and see if you can work that out. As Bob said, local by local. But, you know, again, personal days, sick days are still in the contract. And they're still available and you can still take them.
And we're taping this Monday morning. We've got our executive committee meeting tonight. So we'll have a global discussion with all our local presidents about this evening and probably get you some feedback on that.
How will COVID-19 affect teachers obtaining tenure?
It shouldn't have any impact. Everyone's teaching their full year this year. If you're in your third year towards tenure, this counts as a year. If you're in your first or second year, this still counts as a year towards getting that 3 full years. We don't see any meaningful difference other than folks are working harder than ever.
Yeah, when you get to that 180th day or last day of school, whether it's June 18th or earlier, counts as a full school year. So if this is your third year, you have 3 complete years. If you're ready to retire, then you've worked 180 days and you're ready to go. So no, that should not change from anything in the past.
You want to touch on layoffs, waiving deadline for layoffs?
Oh yeah, that's a terrific question because there's a lot of confusion about that. As everyone knows, in the past, the layoff deadline used to be March 1st. It recently changed under the law to June 1st, and we're getting all sorts of superintendents asking for extension questions. We cannot agree as a union to extend or waive a legal right that is extended by the legislature to our members. I know the Superintendents Association is asking the governor to issue an executive order moving that deadline back because of the uncertainty over budgets. We're not going to object to an executive order. We're not going to object for one time only if the legislature gets back in time to push that deadline back because of the crisis. Because otherwise, it would be an absurd result if they didn't move it. They'll just lay off significantly more people than they need to because of the uncertainty of the budget. And that will just cause a lot of folks a lot of unnecessary angst. So we're not opposed to a one-time solution, but it has to come from the legal authority of the state. It is not something that we can waive. And those of you who've been around as long as I have, remember when we used to waive it. And then management lawyers said, hey, you can't do that. So, and they were technically correct under the law. So we stopped.
Yeah, and then the thing is, if they're going to do the layoffs now, they're going to lay off a lot of people with the uncertainty. And the last thing we want is people, you know, with everything else going on and all the stress that's going on, let's not add another layer of stress, especially when this may work out as we move forward. But we don't know what budgets are going to look like going forward. So if the governor wants to issue an executive order or the legislature wants to do it, as Bob said, it's probably a good idea.
And that, you know, there's a corollary question. Unfortunately, let me start with the positive first. Fortunately, there are school committees and town councils who recognize the extraordinary efforts our members are making and are staying the course with existing contracts and fighting to put increases into their school budgets because that's absolutely the right thing to do. These are the folks who are stepping up in the time of crisis. A firefighter friend of mine says we are all first responders now in this crisis, and I appreciate it coming from someone who was a true first responder during crisis, present and past. That said, there were also town councils and school committees trying to take advantage of the crisis. We'll get to the most egregious of those in a minute, I think. And that's where we need to politically push back on those things. So we're seeing, you know, some folks trying to flatline budgets and ask for givebacks and everything and you know, try and take advantage, which is just a horrible thing of them to do. But for the most part, we're hearing good reports of, you know, and again, we're not, we understand the big picture and how all these things weigh in the balance, but we call them as we see them in those.
Let's just go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off on those that are doing harm. As many people know, our NEA Tiverton teachers has been terminated. And I know that there are a lot of members who are looking for hopefully an update on Amy Mullen's situation. Can one of you give a quick summary and then maybe give us an update of how she's doing, where she is?
Well, let me just give a quick summary, and Bob can get into a little bit of the legal part and how Amy's doing. Amy Mullen, as Steph just said, Tiverton local president for more than 20 years, NEA Rhode Island treasurer, and was also the NEA director representing us on the NEA board in Washington, who left that position only because of the hard time her superintendent was giving her, was terminated about 10 days ago by the school committee, not because of what she did in the classroom or her teaching, but because she was the union president and she pushed back. And she stuck up for her members during distance learning. And the superintendent, who came here from Massachusetts under a cloud, known basically as a bully, cost the district money for some of that behavior, recommended to the school committee, and the school committee fired her. Now, in 43 years of doing this, I have never seen anything that outrageous. We have never had a local president fired because of union activity. They've made her first, we'll explain in a minute, her First Amendment rights. We're going into court. We're going to be asking our locals. We've heard from our locals. We've heard from just about every union within the AFL-CIO what they can do to help. We're going to be putting all that out there to everyone in the town of Tiverton to know what happened, because she was sticking up for her members, sticking up for the students, and they pushed back. And we also, the school committee, chair of that school committee, to blame as well for letting this behavior go on. And then there's an election coming up in November, and 3 of them are up for re-election. And I would guess they're going to have some opposition, and this will not stand. We're not going to let it stand. So a statewide officer, a local officer fired because she was doing her job. We're not going to let this happen. And as I said, in 43 years, I've never seen anything that's outrageous. That superintendent needs to either change his behavior or he needs to go. And that includes the school committee as well. Bob?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary, Larry. I was actually stunned by this. This started a year ago. As Larry noted, Amy was our NEA director, and the superintendent, Peter Sanchioni is his name, in Tiverton, started messing with her release time on that. It's never been a problem. You know, my 28 years here, we've never had problems getting our NEA directors release time. NEA pays the substitute for them to go down to Washington and represent all of our members. And he started using it as literally a misogynistic, sexist, bullying, if you behave, maybe I'll grant you your time type thing. And then, because in a private meeting with her colleagues, she shared what she thought of the superintendent, he actually suspended her last year with pay for 6 weeks, and the investigation proved she did nothing wrong. And they reinstated her, so they gave her a 6-week paid vacation last year. But he put the target on her back, and he came right after her again this year, and the school committee was complicit. You know, all those folks standing behind Donald Trump are complicit in the bullying and lying that occurs there. And this guy is our local version of Donald Trump. He is that bad. And if you search his record in Natick, Massachusetts, they had to spend money on lawsuits where he tried to shut down public discourse. And this has got nothing to do with Amy's performance as a teacher. They literally suggested in their discussions with us that if she resigned as president of the local, we could make this go away. And we're going before the labor board, we're going to federal court. They're being sued not only in their school committee and superintendent capacity, in their individual capacity, because this is a clear-cut example of a violation of First Amendment rights. It is egregious behavior. They will be held accountable for it. I'm still stunned. I'm still waiting for the school committee to come together, realize that they have enabled this narcissistic, megalomaniac bully to run rampant over Tiverton and hurt that community significantly. And if they don't deal with it, there'll be repercussions that last in that community for years to come. We've seen this not as egregious as this before, and the harm it can do to students, especially in the time of a crisis. If this doesn't get reversed in the next day or so, we'll be having community-wide conversations, social distancing included, with the entire town of Tiverton, and ask why they could sit idly by and let this happen. And shame on that school committee for enabling this horrible human being. This guy last week, some teachers courageously said that this was affecting them, and he actually sent out, or required the principals to send out messages saying, oh no, the union had input. We'll decide if we had input. We didn't have input into what was going on, as we are entitled by law to do. And this, the wrong person is not working. The person who shouldn't be working in Tiverton is that superintendent. Send him back to Massachusetts, even though they ran him out of town on a rail there. And that's
70 grand, I believe, right?
And
yeah,
one, I think there was more.
A lot of
yeah, there are a lot.
It's just just
think about this.
Unbelievable.
He does this during this crisis at this time, when everyone is working harder than ever. Everyone, parents, students, teachers, support staff, the entire community is working to pull together, and he pulls this stunt because he thought he could get away with it. He's not getting away with it.
As Larry said, it's an election year, and there are 3 committee members who are up, and I hear it's lovely in Tiverton in late summer, early fall.
Yes,
So
it'll be a good place to campaign, and keeping a social distance if we need to, but we'll be there.
Let's wrap up with, let's talk about end of year calendar. We have a question from Michelle in Bristol Warren. The statewide calendar decided by RIDE presents a problem for our members and others in Rhode Island, and we have heard this in a couple of other districts as well. It's problematic because it will have us working extra days beyond our contractual obligations. Since this is a statewide calendar, what can we do to regain our extra time worked for the district by June 18th? Bob, you touched upon this a little bit earlier.
I think that's an interpretation of what the calendar says. It's the last possible date. If you were scheduled beyond the 18th, you're still out on the 18th. If you were scheduled before the 18th, you're still out on the day you were scheduled. And earlier in the conversation, we suggested having the conversation of whether that the last day for students should be a few days earlier than that, if it makes sense to do some end of the year professional development opportunities to get into the classroom and clean them all out and everything. And the reason that they picked a last day, no matter what day, was so they could get the schools emptied out and turned around for whatever is to come over the summer. It is not a requirement that districts that were scheduled to end earlier than that would go to that date. And we did beg them to clarify that in the press conference, and they didn't. The last day of school topic did not come up in the press conference, but I understand there was a lot of confusion with the school calendar. If someone is telling you that you were scheduled to get out on the 11th or 12th of June and you're required to work to the 18th, they're wrong. Let your president know. Let your UNICEF know. You've let us know, and we're telling you that is not how it works. So let's kill that rumor right now.
Okay. Sorry.
I'm agitated.
We've killed the rumor, so yes.
All right. Well, I think that we covered everything, covered a lot of ground today. What are we looking forward to this week as far as the governor's press conferences? Anything education related that you're aware of or that we should look for? No,
I think for us, it's getting that certification question out and finally answered. I'm going to have a national meeting, political action committee meeting, in which we expect Jack Reed and Jim Langevin and David Cicilline will be endorsed by NEA. And as Bob said, Jack Reed is on the Senate side, has just been a leader over there. And then the message to members is, again, thank you for everything you're doing. I mean, it's just, you're remarkable. And we know what getting toward the end of the year is going to look like. And now we'll be talking about the summer and into the fall. And, that's what we're going to be working on, what it's going to look like over the summer and the fall, how we best protect our members, and also how we help our students. So, and tonight, as Bob said, we have an executive committee meeting, which is the local presidents. So I'm sure any questions they have will we can answer there as well. So, yeah, another busy week.
Yeah, I think you'll hear the governor start to continue to outline what a soft reopening of Rhode Island looks like. It'll be slow and deliberate and science-based and everything else. Don't go racing out there without following the rules or a Stephanie's t-shirt. You know, Stephanie created the idea for that Knock It Off t-shirt. She gave the idea to Frog and Toad. So I want her to get full credit on this call for that, because that was a Stephanie Mandeville marketing creation. We don't want her to quit her day job, but she'd have a future if she did.
Fortunate to know very talented people and know who to bring together to make something happen like this. So just seeing the thousands and thousands of dollars that are being poured into the United Way Rhode Island Foundation Fund for the folks who need it is fantastic, truly fantastic.
It's being modest.
Anyway, we continue to take questions for this segment that we're doing. So members can submit questions at bit.ly/asklarryandbob, all lowercase letters. So please continue to get those in. And that's it. So I'll see you both later tonight for the committee meeting.
Yep.
And we'll see everyone next week.
And yeah, we'll see y'all
Thanks
next
for
week.
tuning in. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, Steph.